Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Andrew Turner, founder and host of the G&T Sessions podcast. And today we have Mr. Patrick Mullarkey. Hi, Patrick. How are you?
I'm great, Andrew. I'm here, sat in the UK after a recent work trip overseas. Sounding slightly hoarse for anyone who's listening. Apologies in advance.
Husky. You got that husky voice.
I'll take that. My wife would take that. She would prefer me with a husky voice, I think.
You've been on Broadway. You've been on Broadway. You see, you've been in LA. You've been kind of like jet setting. Yeah.
I wish.
Look, we got him back from Hollywood just to come on this episode today. You see.
I mean, where else would I be but here? So yeah. But it's good to be here. Excited to be here and excited for the conversation.
Thank you for that opening. Wow, international jet setter. So I know, Patrick, you've been working for quite a while on a quite interesting area, which I think is very, very aligned to what we talk about, actually. So we talk about growth and technology, and there's a little bit of that in the stuff we're going to talk about with yourself. But also we talk about gifted and talented people, and unleashing the people's superpowers. So I think, if you just maybe help the listeners to just understand a bit about what gets you up in the morning, what you're working on at the moment, that'd be a very interesting intro and segue as we dig deeper.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I'm Patrick, based out of the UK, as I said. I've worked for approximately, I think it's nearly a decade in loan development across not-for-profits, corporate sectors, management consultancies, and currently an organisation called Snyk, spelled S-N-Y-K, Snyk.
So not S-N-E-E-K?
No, this is there's a story behind this. We might circle back around to that. It's a whole thing. And, I worked across various cultures, countries and organisations, a lot of work in the EU and UAE, and now more recently across kind of, I suppose, with hybrid and virtual learning aspects across the UK, US, and beyond. We'll get, if you just, because you mentioned it, what gets you up in the morning is always coffee, 100% got to be coffee.
Really?
Yeah, I'm one of those, like, it's not good.
I heard recently you're supposed to wait until after 10 o'clock for coffee, and then it takes 8 hours to get out of your system. So
that is 100% correct, and I don't care. It's I've read that, and I've read some of my wife's a scientist, and she's not a coffee drinker. She's fired some of the research at me, and it is absolutely correct. And quick segue.
It is correct what I just said. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah. If you're pitching, if anyone is listening to this in sales or has to pitch or influence as part of what they do, when I've run workshops with actors, one of the top tips they've given me and the groups is, do not put any caffeine in your system 90 minutes, a minimum of 90 minutes before you present or pitch. The reason is you're going to have natural adrenaline coursing through your body, which is naturally going to affect your vocal cords. They get more dry anyway. Caffeine heightens that. And caffeine and dairy, you should avoid consumption of either in any form about minimum 90 minutes before you have that big pitch. Now, I'm saying that even though I'm talking to you with a cup of coffee.
lurking off camera.
Exactly. But coffee gets me up. My 8-year-old as well. I'm married with an 8-year-old boy, Cillian, and he's brilliant. And from there, it's just focus on the first 20 minutes a day and see where and how it takes you from there.
Oh, you don't have a power hour then? Some people have a power hour.
No, I've got to be honest.
If you're in the area you are, you got to set the bar. You see about what people should do. You got to have this blueprint, Patrick's blueprint.
Yeah, I hear you.
Patrick's path to creativity and fulfillment.
So that patent is pending. Can I be real though? I respect people who do that, but there's a lot of virtue signaling in that space, and it's creeping into LinkedIn especially. I've left other platforms like Twitter and Instagram and stuff like that as a result.
Have you really? Okay.
Yeah, I stepped away. For networking purposes, they were brilliant for years, but gradually got more and more toxic.
What do you mean? Just a quick question. You call it virtue signaling. What do you mean by virtue signaling?
So, you see it on LinkedIn. So this is a tangent, but let's go there quickly. You see it on LinkedIn a lot. Everyone will recognize this. It's like this story of hey, I saw a young man at the station today and I spoke to him and he was homeless and I went and got him a sandwich and, and then I did this and that. And you think, wow, that's really worthy. That's really cool. And then you find out, you look it up, like there's 20 people who've copied and pasted that same story across their LinkedIn. And you're like, right.
Oh, wow.
Like that's a real thing. And all like, kind of like, I suppose, piling on notionally, someone who's trying to do the right thing or trying to push forward a good idea, and then being a bit whataboutery, like kind of, oh wait, hang on, that's a great idea, but have you thought about this? Because if you haven't, you are being quite offensive, and that's not right. And and it's that's why with the morning stuff, I'm quite honest and real. It's like, frankly, my 8-year-old drives the agenda more in the morning, like, because I kind of wake up, I've got stuff I want to do for the day, but like he does not care. He does not care that I've got like a call at whatever time, or I had a call at whatever time the night before. He's like, Dad, I'm awake, you're awake. What are we doing for the next 45 minutes before we go to school? Like breakfast, you have your coffee thing, whatever that is and means. So as much as I like I have certain routines, frankly, in the morning, like it's his routine that defines the start of my day. In a way, I don't mind. I quite like that as well. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good. I mean, it's good. It's good if you can get that time. Because it's precious time, isn't it? It's special time when they're going on that, having some dad time.
Yeah, and it's like before COVID, I used to travel a lot for work, like daily. I'd leave the house at my normal leave time would be around 7:15, and he wasn't getting up till before 7:30 at that point. It's roughly the same now, and I wouldn't see him some nights because I'd come home at like 7, 8. So it's a privilege that he gets here's my agenda for the first hour or so of my day. So yeah,
you do press ups with him and stuff like that, and do meditation with him. And, no, sorry, that should be another episode.
Well, it could be, but he does meditation in school, which I was shocked.
Oh, does he? Right, okay. Oh, cool.
Yeah, I was blown away. I was like, wow, that is fantastic. Please coach me to what your breathing synopsis is. But he calls it sleepy time, apparently, where he's like, I just pretend I'm asleep or I go to sleep. It's one or the other. I was okay, cool.
All right. That's progression in the actual
I know.
In the curriculum.
Yeah.
I don't remember doing any meditation when I was at school.
Same. No, like daydreaming, yes. Meditation, no.
So yeah, I mean, so you mentioned that you've obviously worked in different sectors and different cultures, actually, which is quite interesting as well. Interesting conversation we'll dig into. You mentioned obviously the company you're working for now is a tech company. I mean, I suppose a quick question to you about that is, and the area that you work in, you're working in a particular type of function, which I suppose some companies will have, and some companies won't have. I suppose is that a fair? Depending what how seriously they take the area that you work in. Is that fair?
It's absolutely. I would say it's the difference between organisations who do and don't have this role, and it can. I totally can understand why people view it as a luxury. It's the difference between self-service and actually, would you rather provide a bit of structure and dedicated resource to like your people's learning development? Now, just to be explicit, just to be clear and upfront, learning's happening whether someone's in my job or not. Wherever you are in the world, whatever you're doing, it's just more about, okay, if we can provide dedicated resource and headspace to that topic, what does that mean? Try and scale up how and when people can grow their skills, their expertise, their outlook, their resilience, whatever it might be, in a way that doesn't impede them or get in the way, but also still will amplify any self-service, any self-learning they want to do. And it's been a big, in the time I've been working in the people space, I was a generalist HR professional before I went into learning development. It's been a big mindset shift of organizations, leadership realizing, learning doesn't happen in a vacuum or in a room where there's a workshop or with certain individuals. It's across the board, and people have more autonomy to drive it than ever before. So harness that, accept that, and work through that, and there's more benefits to be realised for everyone. So
do you think it's becoming more and more a must do? Or is it what if you look at the 10-year evolution? Because when I was in a line role, in a corporate, then you had this consultative HR role, And then you also had, I suppose, L&D. We had an L&D team as well, who then would look at, I suppose, building people capability as part of the people plan. And that was more around, I suppose, we called it core skills. And, so it's kind of like embedding certain ways of operating and ways of working. So you had a kind of, I won't say a consistency, but you had that kind of at least some tools of the trade that you knew that, meetings and how you organize work and all those kind of things were kind of embedded into those people. And then you had obviously specializations on the back of that. Is that, I mean, that's obviously a few years ago, but is it a similar kind of vein now, or is it becoming more, with this new environment where not everybody's sat in the office anymore? There's that other dimension of complexity, isn't there, where it's, I know people talk about the future of work, how that fits in together with that as well, and the post-pandemic world.
I
threw a lot at you then.
No, it was brilliant. You're the one who's got to unravel it in a moment when I speak, so it's all good. So I suppose there's two things that jump out from what you're saying there. The first is around, or the approach, like kind of organisations I've worked in, the one I work in now. It's not quite as specific as this, but as a theme is like kind of almost like leaders, managers as coaches, and having that mindset of actually your people are bright and brilliant. And, they might have nuances or aspects of what they do that can be refined and built upon. But you could just assume trust in the first instance around actually what they're doing and what they're able to provide to you. And when you start from there, it's a much more, there's a myriad of opportunities out there in terms of like what sort of resource and support you can provide in an agile format or otherwise, which frees you up from having to build out big, for want of a better phrase, big rocks or curriculums. Where the exception occurs, there's this is the second point. Okay, where's the fork in the road? Where's the exceptions I've seen? The first is like around compliance. No one wants to talk about it. No one wants to touch it. I respect our compliance team who do an amazing job where I work currently. Not my bag, but you've got to have like, you can't be free and easy and stuff with topics like that. And then the other aspect, and this is where there's the sort of, I suppose, the shadow or the bias of my time working in management consultancies is, if the product you're selling out, and I hope these terms don't make anyone flinch, but just for the benefit of the conversation, if the product or service you're selling out is the people, the intellect, the expertise they bring, you need a minimum standard of guarantee of quality. And some of that means actually you need to teach, ingrain certain techniques and tools. So for example, people talk about, say, top-down thinking as like a communication tool in certain management consultancies. People talk about certain organizations, management consultants, how like they will manage and lead a meeting. These are just like little touch points, but illustrations of actually, some people might be like, oh, that creates like certain robots or like, repetition behavior, but that's necessary if your business is, if the product is people you're selling.
If you want to try and deliver consistency, you've got to look at how,
like the last thing I want if I'm a customer buying in services like that is a radical, like myself. I'm more on that radical side of the spectrum, like showing up. He could have a great ideas, a good day, but actually, it's the cliche of like people talk about no one gets fired for hiring IBM. It's because they get a consistency standard of performance and service.
Right.
Now that's like kind of where you need to go and be like specific and uniform in terms of certain aspects of your learning offer and be really clear on that. But that's more like the corporate end of things. Where I veer towards and the work I do is more of like kind of the first aspects around, okay, do we have 2 or 3 big rocks which we know are going to be uniform? Maybe it's, say, around leading and managing others. What's the like clear standards and signals we want to set around there? Then outside of that, what does the organisation say and think it needs in terms of resource and support, and how and where can we be a bit more bespoke, and how and where can we scale up and out some of that bespokeness?
So you know, like that thing about you can have a concept called an academy, where you kind of like, you have a batch of people, you have a set of new hires that you bring in, and you put them through a process. Are you saying it's evolved from that, which I recall from before, into more customized programs based on different types of cohort of people or individual level? It's more of a customization, mass customization.
Yeah, and
level.
Choice is
Right, choice. Yeah.
So people, we were talking about this before we came on, like, you know, it's a throwaway example, but like, you could go onto YouTube and learn all or some of those skills I outlined as like certain management consultants might need. You could learn that in like a half a day, just by searching. The key bit is knowing what to look for and when at the point of need. So that notion of choice of actually, well, is this valuable, relevant to my day job right now, today, this week, or in the next hour is really, really important. A learning function sometimes has to accept you could build out the most whiz-bang curriculum or learning structure and architecture ever, but it's going to be, it's not going to last very much beyond a quarter if you're investing lots of time and effort in building something out like that. What you need to think more, I would say more thoroughly or thoughtfully around is how and where are your touch points to be responsive in point of need, to redirect people to either a resource or a relationship, i.e. role model, mentor, leader, someone they can actually draw upon, to draw from their experience. In a way that means actually like a learning function. So when I started my career, you mentioned about academies. When I started my career, it was almost like, it was like an accepted truth that sort of you'd have these academies or centers of excellence in terms of workshops or learning events for employees. The knowledge will be transferred there. When we all knew actually it was like, okay, there could be some great stuff there, but actually not all the knowledge and expertise is centered around those places. They're in relationships, conversations happening across organizations.
Yes.
Yeah. So that was a bit of a monologue.
I suppose that thing about, if I go back to my GE days, there was a concept called Crotonville, which was basically their kind of management. So it's like their internal business school, you could say. Yeah. Of how how Jack Welch and the team there developed their own capabilities, and then many years later when I joined Tesco, the funny thing was that then I was doing some stuff with the Tesco Bank, and we were looking at how do we embed new processes and learn and help the retail stores understand more about the bank, and I spent some time with their L&D team in Tesco corporate. And I said, this looks really similar to something I've seen before. It was like, oh, yeah, we spent a lot of time in GE Crotonville understanding how they'd done it. So you've got this kind of I'm not saying hand-me-down, but kind of transition, even to, like best practices, you could say. But then I suppose if I analogize to if you start in a brand new company today, or the onboarding process, once you've gone through that initial orientation, I would have thought, specifically in a more modern progressive company, you then have probably platforms and tools and capabilities that you make available to that individual so that they can, I suppose, check into certain themes of developing based on their internal, I suppose, their PDP, as I would call it, their personal development plan. This is what I think I'm strong at. I've done a 360 or whatever. These are things that I think that I need my edges, I need to develop more skills on. And what's available from the business to help me address those gaps, and then what also am I personally doing to address those gaps as well? Because obviously this whole thing about self-development and progressing that kind of topic yourself, not relying on somebody else. You've got to take responsibility for it.
Absolutely, yeah, and that last point is a key one. I just to spend a moment on that. Like, sometimes what I encourage new hires to do is like, they have like checklists of stuff and content they need to consume, but also people they need to meet. As I say to them, like two things. One is like, are you explicit about the problem you want to solve? For every person you've had an introductory meeting set up with, once you've understood what their role is, are you clear and have you made it clear to them about how you help solve problems for them? Like, what's your people like call it like personal brand or value proposition, but I like to say, what's the problem you're here to solve? Because there's got to be something you're here to do.
Oh, what you're about in that business. Yeah, okay.
And it forces the really awkward reflection at first. It's like, well, I just got here. I was like, absolutely. you have just got here. Thank goodness. What is the problem you're here to solve? We're all very excited for it.
What's your one-liner, your elevator pitch? Yeah,
okay. People I know I get uptight about that because it changes, but it's not a. You don't have to be married to it, but you do need to think about it. You do need to think very, very deliberately about it. And the other thing I say to new hires in the context of all the stuff you said around, like, they can access content on platforms, they can access sessions and workshops. I always like to say to them, after the first couple of days or the first week, whether it's your manager, a mentor, or buddy, like, drop them a line and say, these are the 3 truths I think I've learned so far. To validate and verify, executive leadership is quite transparent and communicative here. The cadence is regular. This is where I go to find this piece of content. I need to get it done by this date. I think, but I don't know, that the way to solve XYZ is via this idea or these people. Because then you're validating and checking, all right, is this the right source of truth? Am I actually getting the right information at the right time? And you're asking in such a way which is proactive, so you don't get past that first month or whatever and realize you talked about, say, the cascade of like that GE idea being shared down to Tesco's. You want to make sure your stuff that's being cascaded to you is from the right source or the right answer. And you've got to validate. And that's about you taking ownership and validating that yourself.
And then I suppose it then becomes even, with things that before somebody joins a company, and then when somebody's actually at a company, I suppose there's that really interesting platform called Glassdoor, which is quite interesting as a piece of creating, I suppose, a window into what is it, what's the culture, what's it really like to be like around here. Any thoughts on that?
I think Glassdoor is fascinating because the comments are interesting. I think you could pick any organization, you'll get a mix. You might get one predominance in terms of positive or negative, but what's more insightful is the response from the employer. I think sometimes you very quickly spot the boilerplate responses to, like, when someone's put down, hey, I'm just going to make an example up now. I'm a woman working in this field, and I'm underrepresented minority in this organization and leadership team, and my time here, I think that was a challenge or a problem. And then you see the responses like, thanks, X, for your feedback. It's thoughtful, insightful. We have tried to do X, Y, Z. Or is it boilerplate kind of, so sorry you had a bad time here. Thank you. We acknowledge it. That's it. I think what's interesting about platforms like that is they've become like a TripAdvisor and a sanity check for employers in a way that, like, and I've seen it on the other side, by the way, like for balance of, like, I've been part of organizations and people teams where it's like they are good places, they were good places, and then you see some of the responses is like,
there's a disconnect, you think?
Yeah, how do I navigate this? Because it's I want to have a dialogue, I want to offer that opportunity, but also not come off as like trying to be overbearing. Like what the person's described here is highly sensitive, it's critical and important for them. Like, it's a minefield, but I'd rather live in a world that has a glass door than not. I remember growing up, like, my first entry in the world of employment, I was like, this is like pre-internet days. It was like, well, how do I know what I'm getting into? Like, how like, beyond, I know what that organization does, but I don't know how they do it. I know, like, just because you mentioned Tesco's, I can describe to you as a child what Tesco's did, but I don't know what it would be like on the inside, what that experience would be like. It could have been amazing, could have been average. Platforms and tools like a Glassdoor allow you to kind of get a yardstick on it. But going back again to accountability and autonomy, it's up to the end user. If you're reading reviews there and it's not aligned with your personal ethics code, wherever it might be, then it's up to you whether or not you apply for the job or walk away from whatever's there as an opportunity. I personally, I've done that. I've walked away from something when I've read it in Glassdoor and thought, actually, that's not the spot for me. But
I'm just raising it as a point because I was just thinking about the whole point around I know this is quite a obviously well known phrase that can, the battle for talent.
Yeah.
Is, and obviously it's even more. Obviously there's just been some significant layoffs, in the tech industry. It's circa three, big six-figure number from what you could call the tech titans, or Scott Galloway calls the four horsemen of the apocalypse.
Yeah.
I suppose, I think some of the companies have admitted that they hired too many people during the pandemic because there was a switch of the business model, or a switch of the demand.
Yeah.
But then I suppose it's there's that dynamic between employer and individual, and is that switching where, I remember some work that I did quite a while ago with a great company, Bernard Hodes, about employee branding. How you create the employer brand proposition, and then how do you actually honor the promise, of that. And I suppose, with this thing where, talent, certain types of talent are more in demand and rare. It then becomes an interesting thing about that kind of that journey that a new person, when they join an organization, how do you make sure you look after them, from that initial contact right through to when they transition to something else. And I think, my personal thing, which is why I wanted to get you on the show, was understanding that thing about how L&D becomes strategic in that context, because it says that you're taking people seriously. Having consultative HR, I remember in my day was it puts the onus onto the line manager to manage the team. Obviously, then you try and then work out with the individual about their PDP, and you give them guidance and feedback about what you've observed and what that you think they should work on. It doesn't take anything away from them working, having personal responsibility. But I think it's that element of, in times of place where you actually have a really key skill, or you've got to attract really key people, then to my mind, L&D becomes even more important in an environment where that's happening. Is that? I'm just trying to articulate where I think we're going, or why I saw it was being a important
absolutely.
topic. I just think that it's as you shift from being line HR to being consultative HR, L&D really gives it that power, that leg up to help the CEO, to help the leadership team. Because at the end of the day, if you don't have the people with the right skills, you can't deliver on anything. Yeah, it becomes a challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it acts as an amplifier. That's kind of where I feel like the teams, wider people teams, wider learning teams, that it acts as an amplifier around either building the skills of the people who are in place, or in terms of building the growth and the opportunities the organisation is looking to embrace. And in terms of, like, you used the word like strategic, I think this is where I've seen the biggest change in recent years is learning development. And I'd say even like the last 5-6 years, COVID feels like it's warped our sense of time, but I would say the last 5 or 6 years is the dialogue in learning development be much more thoughtful around, okay, let's pick where we play. Where can we add the most value? Where can we actually, and what is the most value? Is it actually about us, like, being a curator, being someone who facilitates conversations? Like, for example, one of my things, like beyond the last 5 years, has been where I think I've done some of my best work, is making people realize, wait, you've actually got the knowledge, you just need perhaps refinement and help amplifying and the right avenues, the right comms avenues to get your message or your learning out there. It's not me that's the magician here, it's actually you. You just need the right stage, whether that's like as a leader, as an executive, whoever it might be. And that's, for me, is like, that's like
you mean amplifying the L&D agenda within that function, or the overall business, right? Okay.
Using, I like to use a phrase of, like, changing the audience, people from an audience to authors. So whether it's you put people who traditionally might be expected to go through a workshop, say in person, very passive, have something presented to them as a notion or like an idea of truth in terms of their development, they actually flip that and be, okay, right, what do you need, what do you want, and what can you offer? So how do we actually use you as an author of this experience, this piece of content, this resource, and I'll be the facilitator in terms of how we curate this, how we actually create this experience and the architecture that goes around it. But I'm not going to be the face of it. I am, in some ways, the best learning functions I've worked in have been everyone knows who they are, but they couldn't tell you where they are because they're leveraging the business and the organization.
I was just thinking, Patrick, when you were talking, actually, you're like the Wizard of Oz. Yeah, you're the guy behind the. Yeah, there's like.
In fact, that's just kind of like, doesn't that make more sense? So I'll give you an example. Like our sort of our sales enablement setup at Snyk. Like who or what are they interested? Like or new sales hires. Who or what are they interested to hear from? And notionally, corporate person who's part, like as a learning person, that might be their start point of view. Or do they want to hear from like a salesperson? Do they actually want to learn the skills live and direct from someone who's been out there? There's an SDR who's got perhaps their first job out of college or university. Do they want to hear from me, who has zero experience of actually knowing the path they're about to go on? Or would they rather hear from the chief revenue officer who 10, 15 years ago, wherever it is, it's like, I was in your position. I was so nervous, so anxious. Here's how I navigated it. Here's what you should think about. Here's what you do. That's more relevant and useful. And that's as well, like, that's like a small example.
Is that what you've done then at Snyk? You do those type of like skip reviews and kind of like get into the coal face kind of thing.
100%. So like as an organization, like it's like we're very big on storytelling, full stop. I've literally the conference, this Snyk kickoff, like the event I came back from last week in Boston, there was a lot of storytelling. We had at one point as well a panel of our customers telling us stories about working with us.
All right, cool.
Just like it as well. Like it was real as well. About like, okay, this was great. This could be better. This is what we think you can do. This is how we want to work with you in the future. And it was brilliant. Now part of the reason of that isn't just because we like to talk, but also like there's got to be some resonance and emotional response to this stuff for you want to do something different. So as a human beings, we're hardwired. Like stories resonate with us. We can relate to them. They help in terms of memory and recall, and they help generate an emotional response. If you can get someone to have an emotional response about something that you're notionally trying to teach or learn about, it's easier for them to do something differently or learn about. And I know, like for example, you're doing you're working on like your TED Talk. The best TED Talks are the ones that give you an emotional response. All of them have got great academic rigor, but like, they've got to give you that emotional response to do something differently as well. And that is part of like, kind of, we're big on that at Snyk in terms of how we operate and how we do.
Well, it also makes it more accessible and more authentic, doesn't it? I mean, it makes it more, human in the way that you...
One of our sales leaders, Brian McDonough, he's always talking about human moments. Human moments. How and when are you creating human moments in a conversation? Because that can be a point of difference sometimes.
Yeah, because the thing is that the software, you're in a software business, right? So that's where the tech bit comes in the G&T. But you're also helping people grow. Yeah, you help people grow their capabilities, their superpowers, their cape on their back of the shoulder, on the back. Yeah, their underpants outside their trousers. But also, I think because this whole, well, I'm not going to go there, but this whole thing about technology can kind of like run away with itself, or you don't want it to run away with itself. Getting back to the human piece is actually incredibly important.
Yeah.
So people don't lose perspective on it, and how you actually amplify the bits that humans are good at.
Yeah.
As we all evolve to that new AI powered world where we, everything's done for us, and we just have a chip in our heads from Elon. Anyway.
Fingers crossed. Any day now. I'm just
going to get the door. I'm just going to get the door. An Amazon delivery, my chip.
Do go for it.
So, I mean, in terms of your journey personally, I mean, you know, you mentioned that you've been in this space for quite a while. I mean, would you, we talk about in these episodes, you know, because we've got, you know, different people, you know, at different stages of their evolution, their journey, and the whole point of the show was to give examples, you know, get great people on the show to explain, you know, what they come across as they were evolving to where they are.
Yeah.
And you know, the thing called peaks and valleys, you know, so things that were what they saw as high points and, you know, things they could celebrate. And then also maybe things where it didn't quite go to plan.
Yeah.
And they didn't fail, they learned from that. So I suppose understanding a bit more about that from your perspective would be really useful if that's possible.
Yeah, sure. So like when I went to university, UCL, came out with and my degree did not lend itself. It wasn't like I qualified in law or anything like that. There was nothing that lent itself to a specific career ladder. But I knew I wanted to work in the people space. Where I got it misaligned, and this was actually an extended valley, was thinking I wanted to be in the HR, generalist HR space. So for those who don't work in it, you know, like you might know a HR business partner in your organization or a HR officer. That was like my North Star. In my head, I was like, that's me. That's where I want to go. And frankly, like for those 3 years or 3 or 4 years I was doing it, I just look back at it and think, wow, you were like majorly unhappy and you did not realize it. And that was like a period I look back at it and think I was almost projecting a little bit of the organizations and teams I was a part of, thinking, oh, I really don't like it. I'm not enjoying my life, not enjoying my work. And just, it took a long time to realize like the agency and autonomy I actually had to do something about it. And where the sort of the first start of a couple of peaks, there's always troughs, but a couple of peaks was during around 2008, 2009, whatever that era was for the Lehman crash. I was working for a cancer charity, and they like in the space of a few months, they had to like cut 20% of their workforce across the board. What that meant was the learning function suddenly, it needed all the help it could get. There was one person there, and I had a relationship with him, and he was like, could you spare like a day, a fortnight or something to do some learning stuff? And what it gave me exposure to is like, wow, this stuff is really fun for me. It's light work. I was spending time at weekends working for him. He wasn't asking for it, but I'd do it. And it was a good lesson for me at that time, was that if you think something can be better, go get exposure to it. Go explore it, either via your network or by volunteering or doing tasks either in your organization or with other bodies you care about, other organizations. Because very quickly it brought to life as wow, like I've been doing something. I've had a career ladder, but it's been leaning against the wrong wall. I just need to move this. It was literally that. It's that simple. It's like everyone else here is thriving in these jobs that I'm doing, and I resent coming here and getting paid. And how wild is that? Resenting, like I know a lot of people have like jobs they don't enjoy. I get it, but like I was at the point where it was like these people are helping pay my mortgage, and I resent that. That's wrong. That is so twisted. And it just, that was like my first aha moment of career is like, okay, if you want to go find a peak, you got to go explore it. You got to go find stuff and be vulnerable, because you might go explore something and it could be as bad or worse than where you're currently at, but you're more informed. And from there, I just got after that, it was insane looking back, and I got my first job in L&D. Within a month of starting that, I was doing workshops in Dubai and Abu Dhabi for this company. Like, it was one of those where like I landed right on my feet in a way that I couldn't have hoped for better. And it was, it all came from like just trying to get exposure around new skills, new people. And,
opening yourself up to things. Yeah,
because like I remember taking that job thinking the only thing I've got to fall back on is another career in HR. And I just thought, well, I might go back to an happy environment or role, but I need to explore this and find out what this is about. And every job move since has kind of driven that to the point where, like, some recruiters, when I've spoken to them recently, in recent history, it's like they've always asked about the tenure question, like, about, oh, I see the last 4 years outside of Snyk, prior to Snyk rather, I think the last 4 years prior to Snyk, I averaged like a year, 15 months in most roles. And I'm always like really clear. It's like, if there's something I want to explore or think I can improve upon, I think it's on me to go do that, not to hang around and be resentful. So like, beyond that, I'd say like working at Snyk has been like a peak in a way that I hadn't realized that culturally these type of environments existed, where, you know, and I think this is a big, for me, this is a big tech thing. Others, they might comment on this and correct me. So that's cool. I could get that redefined for me. That's cool. But the notion of like, you have environments that are working across different cultures, countries, time zones, but have some like clear big rocks and goals they're working towards. But also, as serious as those goals are, the people here are not serious about themselves in a way I've never experienced anywhere else, that makes them more real and authentic. And that's been an eye-opener to realise that.
Oh, you mean are they more laid back, or are they just more fun to work with?
I wouldn't say they're laid back about the work, but they're humble about. So like Peter McCarthy, our CEO, he talks about hiring. He believes we hire smart, hungry, and humble people as traits. They come out quite regularly. The humility piece is a really common one. Of you know, you can doorstep the founder in the office, and you wouldn't even know you could cut him up in the queue for coffee, and you wouldn't know. Like, there's no sense of hierarchy or rank. Like that could happen. That probably has happened. I probably have done that. But I've worked in other organisations where that notion of hierarchy and authority has not just been assumed but reinforced, and they've been great places. But also, it's almost like
I see. Okay,
yeah,
right. Okay, I see what you mean. So you mean about being accessible and leveling, rather than being a certain layer, you know, a certain floor in the building is reserved for this certain type of level of the organization.
Yeah. And by the way, organizations that are like that, it's probably because at times they have to be. That might be an overplayed strength maybe, but you know, sometimes they have to be. But I realized actually by working somewhere like Sneakers is like, okay, well, there could be like a home for people like me who that just doesn't resonate. That just doesn't land well. It kind of jars a little bit. And going back to the point about, like, I think it's a big tech thing. The reason I think that's the case is there's always new products, there's always new ideas, there's always new startups and scale-ups. You know, there's always fresh perspectives being encouraged and brought out there in a way that those types of environments perhaps don't always nurture. That's why I love working in the field I'm in, because there's that understanding of like, okay, if you've got a big idea or something that's of value, you can run with it in a way that's perhaps not always possible in other industries or sectors.
And do you? I mean, it sounds like you've worked in sectors that are non-tech and tech.
Yeah.
Do you see a difference?
I might jump to an answer, but God, say more before I answer it.
Well, no, I'm just wondering if because obviously the people you're hiring are obviously commercial people and technical specialists, yeah, which I wanted to come on to in a bit later about that nuance. But I suppose, have you noticed anything markedly different in the approach or how the people strategy and the people plan is differently addressed in a tech company versus a non-tech company? Or do you think every company is a tech company now, so it's no longer relevant as a question?
But you know what, we like, there's a couple of like key trends we assume. Like, one of them is like digital first is no longer a choice. But I think there's certain organisations that would struggle with that notion still even now. For the people, for your question, I'd say the people piece is more fluid in big tech. We're seeing that at the rough end of the stick right now across tech in general. Like, the people plan that was in place 6 months ago is probably radically different, because the focus, frankly, is trying to manage through what are very choppy waters, and manage as well gracefully kind of what that means for individuals who might be moving out of organizations and so on. So I'd say, to answer your question, I'm cringing as I say this, but it is more agile. It's more agile and iterative than it might be in other environments. So
Right. Okay. So there's a different velocity to change.
I'd say so. Yeah, I believe so.
Okay. And in that piece, I suppose one thing I wanted to ask you about was because with and this thing about the rise of the developer, not the rise of machines, but the rise of the developer as being some of my experiences in Silicon Valley over the last few decades is that the rock star developer and the remuneration they get and the way they get looked after, etc., because they are building the product and building the revenue stream of the future. Is any perspectives on how that is is that a real phenomenon, or is that just kind of like the media hype, or is it
full
something
disclosure? We say this externally at Snyk, we say it a lot internally. We are developer first in everything we do. It's the way we look at it is, or I suppose the way I like to translate it is, any digital experience you have via an app, a site, a developer has built that. At the same time, you're accepting in good faith, if I think about Snyk, you're accepting in good faith that a developer's built that in a way that's safe, secure, and is not going to expose you to something you don't want to be. So like the notion of like a developer as a rock star, like I'm completely biased in terms of I accept they're at the center of not just building an amazing experience or an amazing product or service or giving people access to it, but doing it in a way that's safe and secure. Now, people don't like. I think sometimes people might get bored of that notion of hearing it because it leads to kind of notions around compliance and so on. But actually, this is like one of the key tenets of if we want to embrace the opportunities that a digital first lifestyle or embrace the choice of digital first in general as organizations or private citizens. I inherently believe that developers are at the center of that opportunity, giving developers the right tools at the right time to build out products and services in a way that's fast and secure is at the center of us being able to explore that. A developer, we would not, so for example, us, we're having this conversation as a result of a developer doing a great job around building an amazing Spotify app and building cool features in LinkedIn and so on, or Matchmaker, or whatever it was. We were able to get in contact. And we were able to do that in a way that was safe and secure because they didn't use rough code from certain libraries that meant that we were exposed to something. So I'm biased from just the industry, the role I'm in, but not rock star, but I suppose like they're like the fire services and the police force that we don't realize we're dependent upon every day. And that's going to become I mean, that's more of a thing.
I think it's that thing about what the thing I was thinking about was have you observed? Because I'm not saying the different businesses have got different economic models of how they create value, and that requires different skill sets to create that value. And I suppose what we're seeing is that a bit like the software's eating the world, the Mark Andreessen quote, etc. So, if I look at when I look at, 20 plus years ago, when I started to get involved in the technology industry, what are you doing that for? Why do that? That's really dull and boring and uninteresting. Yeah. Then I had a diversion into the mobile industry, which is quite technical as well, but it's obviously more consumer facing, but it's still kind of unique. You require some engineering and technical knowledge. And now it's like Goldman Sachs versus Google. Yeah, it's like you would normally come out of university and you go into banking.
Yeah,
obviously banks are technology, require technology to run as well, even more so with the digital banks. I suppose it's traversing into a new skill set and and I suppose how do you in an L&D function, how do you look after those people? Because those people are have got different types of skills. Yeah. They're not, and it's quite creative as an actual activity.
Yeah.
Developing software. And I suppose one of the questions I suppose I was getting down to was about how do you look after that type of person? How do you cater to that type of person? How do you communicate with that person that lights them up and engages them, and makes them realize that even though they may be quite they may have to work in an either singular or small team perspective. How do you tap into that element of looking after them, developing them, helping them to learn, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Or do you find that they're already self-starters, they're already self-learners? I suppose it's just understand a bit more of your observations around that.
Yeah, no. And thinking about, like, I won't tell the story, but like thinking of one of my valleys was kind of walking into a stakeholder meeting with that archetype you just described, was that they weren't a developer, but all the kind of the aspects you kind of outlined there, and almost unintentionally thinking I knew better than them, but they were a self-starter who actually had done so much more of the stuff that I was going to provide to them. They're already further along the journey. So the first thing I'd say is, how do you work with that group? The first thing is, like, understand or take some time to be thoughtful or reflect on, the same way you would in, like, empathy mapping or user journeys, is like, what is this individual? What are the things that motivate this individual? And then building on that, what are their preferences? So in the context of working with others, leading teams, being part of a team, maybe if they're not a leader or manager and they're just like a contributor, an individual contributor, like, what are their preferences and what motivates them to do what they do? Because once you scratch the surface on that a little bit, you can then align to or find alignment around, okay, that's how they'd like to spend their working day. This is why they spend their working day doing what they do. Where does that map out against corporate or wider objectives? So thinking first of all about preference and motivations. From there, though, the thing I kind of accept as like a norm or source of truth is, you know, for me, it's tricky to play or add value in the technical space. But where I think I can as a learning professional is around the behavioural piece, around working and leading with others. So if I'm confident I've understood preferences and motivations, I can then use that to inform, okay, what are the behaviours I either want to duplicate or amplify that individual currently does or others do, and then trying to kind of start dialogue around, okay, this is what I assume or the organisation assumes is needed for this group or set of individuals. How and where what's your views on that, and how and where can we get it towards aligning 2 or 3 of whatever the corporate objectives are, and give it. And again, it's a dialogue then that actually that's where it gets really interesting, because you might find, going back to your self-starter example, is like the team or individual have already found a shortcut to some of what you're trying to walk towards. You just didn't realize it until you had the conversation. So then if you've got that space and time back, what would they like to do with it? What does good to great look like suddenly in that space? It's all, by the way, like, for anyone listening to this, this all sounds kind of, it can sound a bit abstract and hypothetical a little bit. I get it. But it's the way I like to describe it, it's like going on a flight on a plane. As an individual, like, lead stakeholder, I can probably control the takeoff and landing, but everything in between that keeps the plane up to the air is probably turbulence. But you need the turbulence to keep you up. So I need to find out and understand what's in the conversation, to then use that to build out a learning offer that's relevant and useful to the individual and the business.
Yeah, so that's a great analogy. Actually, I think you come up with some good phrases and some good analogies already today, which I appreciate.
Someone's finding this from somewhere.
No, one of the things I was going to say. So when I think about the learning organization, I think about Peter Senge, you know, the guy that's at MIT. In terms of, you know, who would you say are the go-to people who are the latest thinkers around L&D, would you say today? Then who are the people that you are the reference points, or is it still Peter Senge with the, you know, the mental models, system thinking, personal mastery? Is it all that kind of stuff? Is there a more modern or a more up to date guru, you could say, of the learning organization?
So,
any views on that?
I had overexposure to this person's team, not the individual, but the team they're in when I worked at a management consultancy. A gentleman called Nick Shackleton-Jones. If you talk to anyone in the learning space, like, that's the name that gets dropped most often, but for good reason, in terms of trying to get you to think about modern learning with academic rigor and psychological underpinning in a way like the stuff you described with like learning organization, Peter saying it has its place and relevance. But if you take out how people learn, that's, I think he's gone into his second round of publishing his book, Nick's book. That will make you think and look at not just the notion of learning, but education across the board.
Right.
I challenge anyone not to read that book or see conversations with him and not think about education differently. He, in a way, the stuff I was stumbling over earlier, talking about emotional and recall and stuff like that, he explains it with academic rigor and thoughtfulness in a way that aligns with stuff like design thinking and principles of design that we try and use in the learning space. If I was going to say that you could, just because you use the word guru, and he is like, in my mind, he is a thought leader in that space. But beyond that, I'd say like as a challenge.
He's a former kind of Deloitte guy, isn't he? The chief learning officer.
So he was at BP, then he was PA consulting, and that's where I kind of crossed paths with him, or I was there at the same time as his team was. And then I think he went on to Deloitte in the internal role there. I'm not quite sure. And now he's doing his own thing. But like I was going to say, it's a challenge to anyone, and this is reflected in his team. And I say this as someone who probably would not have got hired in his team because of this. He didn't have any learning professionals in his team. What he had was marketeers. What he had was videographers. What he had was copywriters. He didn't have, like, so I came through the more traditional route. Like, I don't think he would have been looking at me as a candidate. And the reason for that is like kind of, you can get good stuff in the learning space in the L&D community, but you've got to think of it bigger and beyond, because the teams and functions that we align with in corporate are probably getting more resonance and value at like the senior exec levels than we are. So I always like the examples. So
you've got to approach it in that same way, haven't you? You've got to approach it as
like a marketeer,
like a proposition.
100%. Yeah, like if you can't articulate it clearly and people can't see the value of it, then they're not going to walk towards it. Marketeers, salespeople, they're having to flex that muscle every day. Why can't we need to feel the same in the learning space? And it's why, like the comment earlier about like to new hires, what's the problem you're here to solve? Like, what are you looking to do here? Like, that's not an easy question to answer, but you need to be thoughtful about it, because, and the same applies in the learning space. Like, what's the problem we're here to solve? We're not just here to collect a check. We're not just here because, you know, the organization thinks it'd be useful to have that as like a banner, team, an illustration of what that means for the business. We're here to do something to solve a problem. So think like a marketeer. What would, like, cliche, the Bezos thing, what do people say about you when you're not in the room? Would they have a view? Would they even know what you did? Would it be good? Would it be bad? Sometimes it's better just to have someone to have resonance, to have a view, even if it's negative. At least they know who you are. So yeah, I would say like anyone, and once you get into Nick's space, if you like on LinkedIn, the stuff he's sharing, you'll find a rabbit hole amongst the comments of people who are being thoughtful or challenging around this sort of stuff and trying to get you to think differently as well.
That's great. That's a great share. Thank you for that.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like he's got an interesting background, doesn't Nick? So it's I think it's a fascinating topic, because I mean, if you think about it, whatever we say about the future of work, I think there's going to be a role for human beings, and obviously people want to, being what they call being a continuous learner, is absolutely critical, I think.
Yeah.
And also this thing about, I'm constantly trying to learn about different things, and it's having a kind of an appetite to keep learning is critical for, I think anybody should consider it. And whether that's learning, I don't know, the latest programming language, or which is probably unpronounceable, or learning how to be better at sales, or learning how to be better at negotiating, or learning how to manage people or lead people. They're all kind of important skills and things that you also got to practice them as well. And you don't always get them right first time. So
I think Gladwell, he talks about that, the notion of deliberate practice, in the context of the Beatles and Hamburg. Can I just talk about this for a sec?
Yeah.
the Beatles went to Germany, and they were like, he talks about this notion of 10,000 hours and so on. I won't get into that, but like their deliberate practice was they were having to gig every night, every day in Germany, and what that meant was when they actually had to come to create, they were quite refined in terms of how they would perform in what's quite a process creation that has like lots of highs and lows, but their expertise because they had so much deliberate practice in a space that wasn't necessarily always safe, because if they didn't perform well, they wouldn't get paid that night and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But trying to put yourself out there and thinking about like, so I always like to look at it this way: 30% of whatever I do in my job today, this week, this month, this year, is probably going to melt away and disappear in the next 4 or 5 years. I don't know which 30% it is. And this is assuming I don't get promotion or, move up to the next level even. I just know technology is probably going to automate it in a way that I can't even imagine right now. So what I need to be doing is experimenting and practicing other things to just try and help explore and make myself more empowered when that change comes. And that's the exciting piece of technology. All the stuff we don't want to do, all the stuff that we perhaps find dull or not empowering, we can use it to automate and kind of self-serve a little bit. So that's why as well. It just gets me excited as well.
Well, but you pre-jumped my question actually about, I was going to say, what are you most excited about at the moment? And I think you just kind of answered it.
Can I share a nervousness as well, and like a call to arms then to build on that? What makes me nervous, like about tech, is a lack of representation and diversity. And any way means you want to take that definition, whoever's listening to this, like just however that lands with you. Because like we see bias occurs in code, like in terms of even
the algorithms, you mean?
Yeah. So if you take and extrapolate that to like when you've got organizations who are underrepresented by certain groups or minorities, the thing that I worry about is like, tech's looking pretty good for a middle-aged white guy like me in terms of like apps and services. Like it's relatable. It'll be relatable to me in terms of things carry on as they are. But we just need to be conscious around bias and a lack of diversity in general and how that's showing up in terms of the technology we build. I think COVID was an interesting experience. That's not the right phrasing, but what it surfaced was almost like it was a big wave. And when the wave has gradually gone back out, there's lots of little rocks at the bottom of the ocean there around equality and who's got access to hardware and software and who didn't and who needed it. Like, different groups, different age demographics as well, like different, school years, like how and where were they affected by a poverty of access to technology and services. And what I hope is it's going to make people realize that perhaps we need to be more thoughtful.
You mean it showed the stark contrast of levels?
Yes, absolutely.
It's back to your amplifier piece.
Yeah, exactly.
That, isn't it? Yeah.
So I'll give you an example. Is a friend, someone in our social circle, they were talking about like the first few weeks. This is in the UK for context, by the way. The first few weeks we were in lockdown. It was like, what do I do? Because my child needs access to my laptop for at least an hour a day to do their homework, and there's certain times a day where there's a half-hour lesson being run on Zoom or Classroom, whatever it was. I've got like commercial meetings and stuff. Like, what do I do? I can't afford, and I don't have a spare piece of kit, and I'm worried about losing my job, because if I lose my job in the current climate, like, what does anyone do? And what that surface is kind of like, I think a bit of, and it's like almost a cosmetic example. That there's more systemic examples than that. But what it surfaced, I think, was stuff like that. And we've got an opportunity to do something about it if we want to. And it's not too much in the rearview mirror. Like, I know we're kind of like in gradual stages of COVID and certain hotspots and so on. But that's something that resonated for me, was like, wow, actually, like kind of it's held up a mirror to my privilege and others like me in a way I didn't expect.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, there's also that thing about as data and AI and all those kind of technologies become more prevalent, then actually the bias in the model becomes more of a concern. It's how you manage that, isn't it? So for making decisions. So Well, we could open Pandora's box with that kind of conversation, couldn't we?
I know, right? I know.
Well, so I suppose in terms of, I mean, it's been a really good conversation, because I think one of the things that hopefully the listeners have appreciated, I think, is the importance of, if you're a founder, co-founder, or if you're a manager in a bigger business, or a corporate or a FTSE 100 or whatever, then, I think what's been really good is you've teased out those kind of things about where L&D is, and also how important it is to kind of the future of work, and how you actually integrate that into how people's human journey from that initial contact with an organization or a team, and how they get the most of it. So, I mean, I suppose in finishing off this week's episode, I was just going to ask you about, what would be the kind of 3 big takeaways, or 3 to 5 things you want to share that anybody listening today would want to, kind of take out of today's episode that you could really apply into what you're doing in the future. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I wrote some quick notes just for this, actually, just in case it came up. So first is, I hope it's come across in what I've described my career and life in general. There's no one and done in your life or your career. You never really arrive. You might have a certain goal or point in time. You get to somewhere, and there's always something that's next. There's always somewhere else you want to go. So even if you hit something, you don't meet your expectation in life, your career at this stage, there's always a next page, a next chapter. So don't worry about it. It's all good. There's something next around the corner. Second thing is, tech is here and can be a force for good, but we've got to play our part in it. And by that, I mean humans of all shapes, sizes, races, demographics, whatever that means to you. Let's get involved in tech, wherever you can, and get involved with trying to get others represented in tech who aren't necessarily there in the first place. And then the final thing I'd say to anyone listening is, whether it's your job, personal relationships, whatever it is, have you ever thought about what would need to keep you there forever? What would need to be in place to keep you in that job forever, that company forever, in that partnership, that relationship forever? If you could take some time to think about that. I always do that quite regularly. And it's not in place where you're at. Go explore. Go find somewhere else, because you might find actually gives you perspective on what you currently have, or you might find, wow, do you know what? This space is great, but I deserve better and can get better. That's better for me and better for them. So think about kind of what would make you stay in a certain time or place or with people forever. What would you need to have in place there? And then if it's not there, go find it. Go explore it.
Those are great ones. I mean, the first one that triggered in my mind was the Matthew McConaughey speech about the future hero. Yeah?
Yes.
So there you go. Patrick's done one on Matthew McConaughey, which is not a bad achievement. And then the last one is kind of like find your tribe, I would call it.
Yeah.
Find your tribe.
And I say that as someone who feels like at the age of 40 something, whatever it is, don't worry about it. Yeah, I feel like I've only just found my career tribe after the best part of 25 years scratching around, trying my best, moving that ladder from place to place. I feel like, right, I have the right ladder. Now this is the right wall. But it's only now. And it was only through a lot of experimentation and exploring I was able to do that.
That's a great way to finish this episode. Thank you so much. So that was Patrick Mullarkey, who is a L&D superpowers guru, super person, currently working for a very interesting tech company who has a very interesting logo of a dog with very pointy ears, I recall.
Patch, that's his name.
It's called Patch, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Is it Doberman?
I believe so. Yeah. Very. Dogs keep you very secure. That one.
I don't know. I wouldn't call it. You wouldn't only call it a Doberman Patch, would you? I suppose you call it something different. But anyway,
hang on a sec. Why do you even call it Patch?
Oh, I know. Okay, right. Okay.
Hey,
right. Sorry. Boom. Sorry about that. Yeah, anybody wants to look up that, then I'll just explain. Yes, that's Patrick Mullarkey, who's been a wonderful guest today, and thank you for coming on the show. And this has been Andrew Turner, founder and host of the G&T Sessions podcast. Have a lovely day and see you soon.